impacts there. There's at the back there's a reference, or you can go online for this VegSafe program. It's a program through Macquarie University. If you're worried about your soil quality, it's a great way to just take 3 bags, little bags of soil from your backyard, you send it into Macquarie University, they'll test it for you and send you back the results, and we would love to share those results across the community as well, so that we can gather some data on the impacts of the quarry and the old tip site. We've heard from Noel about the, just conscious of time, so yep, way behind. Ray and Nasser, I would suggest, if you are really concerned and want to know more about air quality and the impacts particularly on human health, because we can say, oh well, you know, there's going to be more cars in the area, there's going to be all this construction, there's going to be diesel engines in these trucks throughout our area, and long term potentially we are the point source for the pollution coming out of very long tunnels. And you can say, well, you know, that all gets dispersed. I'm not fond of that word because it sounds like disappeared, and that's certainly not what happens. But it is really important to understand some of the human health impacts and the emerging research around air pollution and what it does to the human body. The particulate matter that Noel was talking about, that's a human hair. These are very, very tiny, tiny little particles, and the size of the particles are important because our lungs are great big filtration devices, and they're built to filter out certain sizes of particles. So fine particulate matter is the 10 micron there, where you have street dust, and that's what we're talking about when we see those visual dust storms coming up. So we get increased respiratory ailments and a decrease of pulmonary function from those sorts of particles. As we start to go lower, we get some quite serious diseases. So industrial dust and exhaust is increased risk of lung cancer when you get down to the very fine particles, which are in diesel. There's increase of heart attacks and cancer. And those Ray has given an abundance of research, so if you'd like to go online and have a look at it, I'm just going to point out a few things. One myth I want to bust that's gone out there is that diesel fumes aren't actually carcinogenic, and they absolutely 100% are. They're classified under the IARC classification scheme as a category 1 carcinogen, along with some of those other items. One of the things I'm going to skip to here is just how seriously pollution affects human embryo development. And it can affect development from a conception all the way through to birth, and particularly preterm birth and reduced weight at birth has been linked to directly to pollution. So even seemingly trivial periods of exposure to pollution can harm organs and tissues in the fetal brain and nervous system. Not just at development and birth, but there's lifelong impacts for pollution. So particularly when we're talking about these sensitive receivers, and I've seen on, you know, it's interesting looking at online comments and the reality versus sort of what's being said, that, well, if we're worried about pollution, you know, why are we so worried about it around the kids? Yes, we all should be worried, but we should definitely be worried about our children and pollution. As we said, there's fetal implications, smaller head size, lower birth weights. For babies and toddlers, there's developmental problems, respiratory problems, and slower development of lung function and asthma. That's just a graph showing you, just as the carbon dioxide exposure increases, how much a child's growth actually decreases. The population child growth is affected. This one I found particularly alarming. So this is a lung cell of a child, and those black particles are actually inhaled fossil fuel derivatives. So pollution affects us down to a cellular level. And that is, a lot of that is because when we breathe in these small particles, they make it all the way down to the bottom of our lungs, and they actually infiltrate into our circulatory system. And there's just a massive body. I won't even, there's New England Journal of, there's all sorts of very reputable, the Lancet, medical journals across the world that are publishing data constantly. In fact, I took my mum's had a brain tumour and took her to an endocrinologist, and the endocrinologist sent me an article the following day saying, oh, I just got this research saying how there's now a link between pollution and diabetes. So we're increasing our usage, we're actually increasing our diesel usage as well, which is a real concern. I won't go through all of his data, but it is an Australian problem. I think there's a perception out there that this is a third world problem. It is an Australian problem. We have, and it's a cost to our economy as well. So the cost of air pollution from motor vehicles was $2.4 billion. Those sorts of health costs, which are well documented by organisations like the OECD, are not being factored into this story. So one of the things that I will point out, racing through his slides, is that there's no safe level of exposure for many of these pollutants, and that's been increasingly reported by organisations like the World Health Organisation and others. And so when we're looking at these standards that Noel referred to, they are not necessarily an indicator of particularly sensitive population of our children's health, that if we meet this particular standard, it's a guarantee that we won't be harmed by pollution. That is something that's been made very clear in the research. The data that we do have from the tunnels that have been put out there is really, many of the scientists that have looked at it would say fairly inconclusive, really. There was a cancer cluster found around the M5. It wasn't linked. Where we fall apart is that we try and link it to the monitoring data. We're very focused on our monitoring data. And my analogy of this is like a child coming to you and saying, oh, Mum, I'm feeling really sick. And you pull out the thermometer and you go, well, you don't have a temperature, so you're not sick. Just because our monitoring is not capable of picking up exactly where these pollutants happen to fall, it's a very difficult area of science, the plume science and where the pollutants fall, doesn't mean we should discard the health data that is out there that is just overwhelming about human health. And that's just a diagram that shows actually our exceedances in Sydney are quite substantial. Wendy, if it's okay, I might just get you to pop up really quickly. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, but please welcome Wendy up here. She's come to talk. Wendy's an award-winning investigative journalist, and we should call her Professor.